Tonight, we see you. The UK's warning to Vladimir Putin as a suspected spy ship is spotted off the coast of Scotland. The UK's Defence Secretary reveals the crew of this Russian vessel used lasers against RAF pilots and says he's readying the military to respond.
We see you. We know what you're doing. And if the Yantar travels south this week, we are ready.
A threat to the UK and now reports of a possible peace plan as Russia steps up drone attacks on Ukraine. Washington and Moscow are said to be locked in secret negotiations. Ukraine is reportedly being pressured to give up weapons and territory. But has anything really changed? We'll discuss that tonight. Plus,
there's a landscape of devastated buildings. And the sounds you hear, well, that's a drone above us. There's wild dogs barking and occasional bouts of gunfire.
Rubble and ruin on both sides of Gaza's yellow line. We report from inside the Strip. And
in Nigeria, Christians are being targeted, driven from their homes, and killed.
As rapper Nicki Minaj addresses the United Nations, we examine how evangelical Christianity is permeating politics from the US to Nigeria to Brazil. And scenes of celebration for the smallest ever country to qualify for the World Cup. That's all coming up on The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Good evening. We begin tonight with the Russian spy ship on the edge of UK waters and the cryptic warning from the Russian embassy here. This is the Yantar. Moscow says it's a research vessel. Britain believes it has a more nefarious aim: to spy, maybe sabotage undersea cables. Our team has been trying to map its journey. It was off the coast of Amsterdam at the beginning of the month and off the coast of Scotland for nearly a week. The British government is treating this seriously. Just have a listen to how the Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper responded to a question from our Europe correspondent.
We will continue to be vigilant and determined in our response. It will not deter us from supporting Ukraine, quite the opposite.
Well, the response from Russia is also interesting. Just have a look at this. The endless accusations only raise a smile, the embassy here says. We are not interested in British underwater communications. The statement goes on to talk about new dangerous situations. The UK is being accused of paranoia. Of course, we know deception is also part of Moscow's MO. So what was that ship actually up to and how could Britain respond? Here's our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn.
This is the Yantar being stalked by the Royal Navy in 2018. It may not look much, but beneath its scruffy exterior, this is Russia's most advanced spy ship, bristling with surveillance and intelligence gathering technology. And now back on the edge of British waters, prompting this warning from the UK's Defence Secretary.
My message to Russia and to Putin is this: we see you, we know what you're doing, and if the Yantar travels south this week, we are ready.
The Yantar can map and potentially attack undersea cables and pipelines off our coast. But also worrying defence officials this time, RAF planes sent to track the Yantar were attacked with dazzling lasers.
We deployed a Royal Navy frigate and RAF P-8 planes to monitor and track this vessel's every move, during which the Yantar directed lasers at our pilots. That Russian action is deeply dangerous.
Russians are thought to have used lasers against Royal Navy ships before, but not flight crews. It is, say military experts, a worrying development.
I mean, if this had been used to dazzle a pilot of an aircraft and that aircraft had subsequently crashed, then maybe the case could be made like not only was this hostile, but it was fundamentally an armed attack because it had the same impact as if you'd launched a weapon. I think the government's probably publicising it in order to build up a case that demonstrates the Russians do not act professionally.
Britain's Ministry of Defence has released this thermal image of the Yantar. Sky's data and forensics team has analysed it. It shows the A-frame of the boat used to deploy underwater equipment in its operating position. Strong evidence the Yantar was engaged in underwater surveillance at the time the photo was taken. But in a statement this evening, the Russian embassy in London said the endless accusations and suspicions of the British leadership only raise a smile. The actions of our country do not affect the interests of the United Kingdom and are not aimed at undermining its security. We are not interested in British underwater communications. The developments come as Russia intensified attacks on Ukraine, with devastating airstrikes in the far west of the country. Cruise missiles and drones hitting a block of flats, killing at least 25 people, including 3 children. Russia's relentless aggression continues while it prods NATO countries with a range of hybrid provocations, preparing potentially for more open conflict. Dominic Waghorn, Sky News.
Well, there are also reports tonight that Washington has been secretly forming a plan with Russia to end the war in Ukraine. Let's go straight to Washington and speak to our US correspondent, Mark Stone. Mark, this sort of was first revealed about 24 hours or so by Axios. Since then, we've seen an awkward and slightly embarrassing moment for the US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff as well. But just hash out first for us what that report actually said about this secret negotiation taking place.
Yeah, it's been one of those days, Yalda, where there have been snippets of information, and I've spent the day bashing the phones, trying to talk to different individuals to get a sense of what the jigsaw is. And actually, we got a bit of a clue, as you say, around lunchtime when Steve Witkoff, who was Donald Trump's envoy, replied to the post by the Axios journalist on X, the Axios journalist Barak Ravid, very well sourced. He sent out his story, to which Steve Witkoff, as you can see there, replied, saying he must have got this from Kay. Now, he clearly meant to reply privately to someone, or perhaps forward it. Sorry, my phone's ringing. Perhaps forward it to someone else, but he ended up publicly replying on Twitter. Very interesting. Now, who's Kay? Kay is likely to be Kirill Dmitriev, who is in a sense the kind of yin to Witkoff's yang in this whole process, because rather like Steve Witkoff, Kirill Dmitriev is an unorthodox guy. He's not a diplomat, but he's the person, he's an economist, in fact, a US-trained economist, a Russian, who is the person that Putin seems to have entrusted in trying to work out what this peace deal might look like. So you have this real estate agent, Witkoff, this economist, Dmitriev, on the other side. The two of them have been talking. We know that he's been here in the United States, and we now know that he was in Florida recently talking to Witkoff. And there appears to be what's being described by Axios as a 28-point plan, which I've spoken to the Ukrainians today. They are not happy with, because this plan would effectively cede all of the Donbass region to Russia as part of a peace deal. Now, clearly, that's not something the Ukrainians would want to do. It is something that we've discussed and has been floated many times before, but it appears now to be in a plan that at least the Russians are pushing the Ukrainians via the Americans to accept. Now, to add to the intrigue, the Army Secretary, the most senior civilian in the Department of War, the Department of Defense, as it was once called, is in Kyiv. He is briefing Ukrainian officials now on this 28-point plan. So something is being cooked up behind the scenes. And we also now know that the chief of staff to the Ukrainian president has also been in Florida talking to Steve Witkoff. So an interesting load of jigsaw pieces that we're trying to put together. But what is intriguing to me, I spoke to some European sources today about this plan. They said they knew nothing about it. So the sense is this is being put together by the Russians with the Americans, presented to the Ukrainians, and the Europeans and the British would just have to follow along with it.
Yeah, it feels like deja vu, Mark. We were sort of having the same conversation about a year ago,
all that.
Just under a year ago, exactly. You should pick up that phone call. It might be one of your sources updating you. Thanks so much for bringing us up to date. Now, from one nation state to another, today China has also responded to accusations they've been spying on the UK. Like Russia, the foreign ministry said the claims were unfounded and that Beijing had no interest in gathering intelligence here. MI5 warned MPs and peers about 2 recruitment headhunters who were working for Chinese security services. Asia correspondent Helen Ann Smith asked the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson for comment.
Is it not quite far-fetched and perhaps even more damaging to bilateral relations between China and the UK for China to continue to maintain that the UK are just making it all up?
China has repeatedly made clear its solemn position on this matter. We firmly oppose such unfounded allegations and the exaggerated portrayal and sensationalism that project one's own biases onto others. Judgments based on erroneous information will only lead astray. China never interferes in the internal affairs of other countries, nor does it have any interest in gathering so-called intelligence on the British Parliament.
It is a pretty standard part of the Chinese playbook to just flat out deny these types of allegations, to say, look, nothing to do with us, this is all fabrications, all part of an attempt to smear China. That is always what they say to this sort of thing. But I think the particular phraseology here that China has, quote, no interest at all in what's going on in the British Parliament might have raised some eyebrows, because, look, it's pretty well understood that China has a large and very sophisticated espionage operation. Certainly here, as journalists based in Beijing, we have contacts who say that actually approaches from the Ministry of State Security here is not particularly unusual. People do experience that. But look, I think the truth or untruth of this particular allegation, this particular incident, is perhaps not really the key point. I think what matters is how both parties will go on to litigate this, what they'll say in public, how they'll choose to push this on or not. I think from the British side, MI5 and the British Parliament too, they've got some interests in sending a bit of a signal to the Chinese, saying essentially, look, we're just not going to take this sort of stuff lying down. But the Chinese, for their part, look, they really don't like this type of playbook. They do not like this type of laundry being aired in public. They do not like this type of public allegation and public sort of mudslinging. So that will certainly kind of be cause for slightly thorny negotiations going forward, I think. And that matters because there are important issues coming up in the next few weeks, not least a decision on a new Chinese embassy in London, which has been very controversial. Some people saying that the site of it poses a threat to national security. The Chinese, of course, saying that's not true. So, look, lots of difficult territory ahead, I think, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if more similar allegations like this raise their heads in the coming weeks, months or years.
That was Helen Ann Smith there. Now to Gaza, where Sky News has witnessed firsthand the devastation caused by months of relentless bombardment. Israel does not allow news organizations to report independently from Gaza, but today it took a group of journalists, including Sky News, into the area of the Strip occupied by Israeli forces. The brief visit was highly controlled and offered no access to Palestinians. Military censorship laws in Israel means we showed the IDF all our material before publication. Sky News maintained editorial control of this report at all times. Here's Adam Parsons' report.
Enter Gaza and you are surrounded by the scars of war, by the fields of rubble and ruin and the echoes of pain. We've come here with the Israeli military. They're in charge of where we go and what we see. We're on their side of the yellow line that now divides Gaza. On the other is the territory still controlled by Hamas. We've just entered Gaza. The vista out there is complete destruction. This is the Israeli side of the yellow line. There are almost no civilians here, lots of IDF personnel. We're heading to the vantage point. We can see the other side of the yellow line. That's where around 2 million Gazans are packed together. We're taken to an army base a couple of 100 meters from the yellow line, and this is the view. 100,000 people used to live in this historic town. Now it is a scene of absolute ruin. The red and white mast in the distance sits right on the dividing line. Beyond that, Hamas is in control. And that border amplifies chronic mistrust and loathing. And today that led to more violence. Listen to this. We regularly heard automatic gunfire in the near distance. And we then learned that Israeli soldiers had seen people crossing the yellow line and had shot them dead. Israel says they were Hamas terrorists. The soldiers here insist their role still hasn't changed, that they're protecting Israelis from attack, that Hamas is an unrepentant enemy.
They haven't changed who they are. And it's going to need pressure from the international community and maybe also from Israel to make sure they disarm. Hamas is rearming. Hamas is killing its opposers on the street. Hamas is trying to assert dominance in Gaza, is trying to assert their power. And Hamas is parading the streets with guns.
And that sense of an unfinished mission pervades here. So long as Hamas still has weapons, it is very hard to imagine Israel withdrawing from this blighted land. Well, the vista here is incredibly bleak. It's a landscape of devastated buildings. And the sounds you hear, well, that's a drone above us. These wild dogs barking and occasional bouts of gunfire. Now, the Israeli military controls where we go and what we see. So they have allowed us to witness this. And I can just see a plume of smoke coming up there from an explosion. But what we don't get to do here is meet the civilians, who are just a few hundred meters away from us on the other side of the yellow line. We may not be able to get there, but others can. So while I looked at Shajir from one side, our colleagues from Gaza visited from the other, witnessing the destruction from ground level. It's hard to imagine anyone could live among this, but remarkably some do. Iman's home has been destroyed. Her husband is desperately ill, her children are exhausted, and she is at breaking point, living among rubble.
I'm giving up. One day they will announce that we have all been killed. We are sitting on the edge of the yellow line, and there is so much suffering.
We ask if she finds any comfort at all in the peace plan.
I want to be optimistic, but I'm still not 100% sure what is going to happen. They are giving us anaesthetic to numb our pain.
But that pain and tension rolls on. In the hours after we left Gaza, more than 24 people were killed by Israeli military action, according to the Gaza Health Ministry. There is a ceasefire here, but it doesn't always feel like it.
And Adam joins us live now. Adam, great reporting there. I mean, the scenes there look absolutely apocalyptic. And just looking at the last and final images, the idea that we've talked about this ceasefire coming into effect, but it seems to be violated on a daily basis.
Yeah, it's a ceasefire, but actually the fire rarely ceases. The Israelis will say that they are responding to threats when people come across the line. And of course, Hamas will say that the response is wildly disproportionate. Hamas has actually denied involvement in any attack and has called on mediators to get involved. So the tension, the hatred, the loathing between these two sides really is unabated. And I think everything stems from that. And that loathing, that mistrust is what led to the attacks, of course, on October the 7th, when over 1,200 people were killed, and then 2 years later to the sites that we see today, the result of the enormous Israeli military response in Gaza, the utter devastation. And I have to say, when you stand there and you look around from that vantage point down on a place like Shajir, and you simply see building after building that has not been merely attacked, but which has been flattened. I looked at a building that I guess was 6 stories tall, and every layer was just lying on top of each other. It's simply pancaked down. Well, who knows who was in it at that time. The fact that people within that devastation are still trying to live surrounded by that, I think gives you an idea of the desperate circumstances that are bedeviling so many people in Gaza.
Yeah, and Adam, I guess the relentless bombardment that we saw in Gaza that was killing hundreds of people on a daily basis, that may have stopped, but every day we are still hearing about dozens of people being killed. And on the other hand, Hamas is back to policing and essentially governing Gaza. This outcome is almost predictable in many ways.
Yeah, that is a crucial series of questions. And they do come back to that one of, will anything change? And when we were speaking to Lieutenant Colonel Shoshani up there, I mean, his point really was, well, we won't be going anywhere unless Hamas disarms. And then when I put to him questions, well, how will you know when they've disarmed? Who's going to disarm them? He said, well, these are questions for politicians. And of course, he's right. These are questions for international politicians, for Israeli politicians, questions for Hamas, questions for the mediators in this peace plan. And as we said right from the start, Yalda, standing here, this was always a peace plan fueled by optimism and by the hopes that it could be fulfilled. And yet all this time on, we still don't have answers to these fundamental questions. And I think there is a growing fear that unless they are answered and addressed, and we have facts about this stabilization force, facts about the future governorship of Palestine, we have actual facts about the disarmament of Hamas, then there will come a point when it seems as if it is broken and when order will break down itself in Gaza. And one crucial question there, again, of course, unanswered, is that yellow line having now divided Gaza in two, will Israel simply hold on to that area? Could Gaza ever be reunited?
Adam, thank you very much. Let's now speak to Aaron David Miller, a Middle East advisor, author and negotiator. Thank you so much for joining us here on the programme. You have written, shortly after the peace deal was sort of announced and details of it came out, you wrote about it and you talked about that this is a sort of a moment of perhaps hope, and it felt like an optimistic piece. But when you look at the situation now, and I know that you were being realistic as well when you wrote that piece, does it feel like what we're seeing is a sort of a bandage and the root causes are still not being dealt with?
Oh, I think there's no question about that. And thanks for having me. Look, you have a moment here in large part because you have an American president that for the first time, certainly among the Secretary of States that I worked for, Jimmy Carter to Bush 43, you have a president who is willing to basically tell an Israeli prime minister, if you don't sign up for this plan, and this plan is a very pro-Israeli plan, let's be clear, the president, quote, said, we will leave you, unquote. And I think Benjamin Netanyahu, looking for re-election, believes he needs Donald Trump's support. So what you have now is an unprecedented degree of bigfooting by an American president. They've taken over the surge of humanitarian assistance now up to 800 trucks a day. It's still not adequate, don't get me wrong. They've created this civil military coordination center, staffed it with 200 troops, diplomats from CENTCON and diplomats from all over the world. So on a performative basis, it looks like the president of the United States is owning this. And the UN Security Council resolution, frankly, created a historic opening, and it's internationalized the Gaza portion of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which is really quite extraordinary. The problem, as you've broken the code, you've pointed it out, unless the two questions, who or what will govern Gaza, and more importantly, who or what will guarantee the issue of security in all of its very complicated dimensions, unless those questions are answered, and answered relatively quickly, you're going to slide into a situation in which Hamas will control roughly half of the Gaza Strip, the most preeminent political actor. The Israelis will maintain they're not going anywhere in the 47% that they occupy. And while the war, as we've known it, the bloody, horrible war, is probably over, you pointed out minutes ago that you're still going to see kinetic activity, Hamas challenging the Israelis to the degree that it's a challenge, and the Israelis responding relatively disproportionately. 25 Palestinians killed today, apparently, all across Gaza. So and skill. Will the U.S. step up, and will it harness the others to step up as well?
And I guess, Aaron, in many ways, what we saw on our screens just now is what we've seen, the horror, the devastation, the flattening of Gaza. But it also feels like we've gone back to October 6, 2023, where Hamas is more or less back in power and refusing to give up its arms. And the Israelis are targeting them, and Palestinian civilians continue to die, caught in the crossfire of all of this.
If pre-October 6 was the new baseline, as horrible as it is, I take it, but it's worse than that, because what you're left with are two traumatized, clearly Palestinians in Gaza, traumatized. The shadow of October 7 will loom large over Israel for a very long time to come. It's worse than that. The new hope, and I guess it's a moment, I describe it as a moment, I believe it's a moment, and it will be lost, is that you have the U.S. stepping up. But again, the president has added solving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. He now counts it as number 8 to the 7 conflicts he's already resolved. If he walks away, and that's the tendency, it seems to me, the recent visit of MBS in Washington, I was sort of surprised, I shouldn't be, by the fact that Israel and the Palestinians appeared to be a footnote, a kind of afterthought in 2 days, and it's ongoing, of a looming bromance between the president of the United States and Mohammed bin Salman. And it's worth pointing out, by the way, that among the missing in action at Sharm el-Sheikh, signing that peace agreement, was MBS and the Saudis. So to a degree, they've distanced themselves from this as well. No, the moment will not last, and it really, really require a 24/7 effort. I'm not sure that the administration is thinking of it this way.
Aaron David Miller, really grateful for your time. Thank you so much for joining us and for all of your analysis.
Thanks for having me.
You're watching The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Still to come, as rapper Nicki Minaj backs Donald Trump's claims of Christian persecution in Nigeria, I'll be joined by the president's spiritual advisor, Pastor Mark Burns.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks.
If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach.
This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.
What might happen if Russia attacked the UK?
This is clearly an enormous show of force.
It is definitely out of the ordinary.
We ran a war game with former ministers back in the hot seat.
Ben Wallace.
Amber Rudd.
Jack Straw.
It's the kind of war game that's genuinely tested inside government.
The Russians are signalling that there may be an attack.
Russia knows our weaknesses, but do you? I'm Deborah Haynes. From Sky News and Tortoise, this is The War Game. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to the programme. Award-winning rapper Nicki Minaj is no stranger to the big stage, but this time her audience was very different. Speaking at the United Nations in New York, she publicly backed Donald Trump's allegations that Christians face persecution in Nigeria. Just have a listen.
In Nigeria, Christians are being targeted, driven from their homes, and killed. Churches have been burned. Families have been torn apart, and entire communities live in fear constantly, simply because of how they pray. Sadly, this problem is not only a growing problem in Nigeria, but also in so many other countries across the world, and it demands urgent action. And I want to be clear. Protecting Christians in Nigeria is not about taking sides or dividing people. It is about uniting humanity.
That was Nicki Minaj there. Well, the fate of Christians in Nigeria has become something of a cause for the US president. Earlier this month, he suggested a possible troop deployment, maybe even airstrikes. Have a listen.
They're killing record numbers of Christians in Nigeria, and they have other countries very bad also. You know that part of the world very bad. They're killing the Christians and killing them in very large numbers.
Well, just over a week ago, I put the Trump administration's claims to the Nigerian Information Minister, Mohammed Idris. He told me the US is using misleading and incorrect data and that violence is claiming Muslim and Christian lives.
Yes, we do have religious issues in Nigeria. Yes, we do have security issues, especially in the northeastern part of the country, the northwest and the north central part of the country as well. People are being killed in the mosques. People are also being killed in churches.
But because militia violence in Nigeria is so complex, these figures may not tell the whole story. I've been speaking to Pastor Michael Burns, an evangelical minister who is one of Donald Trump's spiritual advisors, and started by explaining his role in ending the violence.
Well, you know, again, I don't represent the U.S. government. I don't represent President Trump officially. I've just been a longtime spiritual advisor to him way back in 2015. Of course, I'm one of the, I would say, rare trusted voices that is able to communicate with the president. And obviously, anything that is of significance that he needs to know about, you know, I communicate that to him. I communicate that to the State Department. So I'm throughout all of the communications, whether it be with the White House directly, with the president directly, with the State Department directly. I just operate in what we call spiritual diplomacy.
And just within that role, I mean, if we were to talk about the issue of Nigeria, that's clearly one that he is very focused on, what he describes as the persecution of Christians in Nigeria. He has gone as far as ordering potential military operation in Nigeria if, as he says, the killing of Christians in Nigeria doesn't stop. Is that through conversations that he has had with you and the advice that he's been getting around that?
You know, I can tell you that the Nigerian leadership is very thankful for President Trump. They are ecstatic that President Trump has taken an eye on the situation that is happening in Nigeria, and that They're welcoming any assistance that President Trump has. And so when you speak to the Nigerians and those who operate at the highest level of leadership in Nigeria, you discover there's a massive onion that needs to be peeled back. Not only do you have Boko Haram, you have armed herdsmen, you have leftover militia that feel like they was promised certain things that never came to pass. And so it's much bigger than just one group. But also, we got to be very clear. This is not a war of Christians versus Muslims. However, Christians are dying at a higher rate, most definitely are being targeted for our faith. Muslims are dying too. And so this is really a battle of good versus evil. This is a war on terror.
But he has a particular focus on what he is saying is happening to Christians in Nigeria. And when you speak to Nigerian officials, when you speak to groups that are documenting the numbers, they are not describing the situation that Christians are facing as genocide. They are saying what you're saying, which is that there are groups from both sides, Muslims, Christians, being targeted by militants, by terrorist groups, and that they want to ensure that that stops as a whole. Some of the numbers that Donald Trump has been coming up with have also been refuted. So I'm just curious to know where he's getting the advice and the numbers from.
Well, you know, again, there's many voices in direction towards the White House, and that's politics 101. I mean, the president is getting information from those who say that they're close to the heart of the matter. But one of the advantages of being a pastor, of being a spiritual diplomat, is that we're able to go where policies and procedures block you. One of the concerns that people have is that if we come in and strike, and there are Nigerians who are welcoming President Trump, please come in and strike. The concern is if we come in and strike, we got to finish the job. And so obviously that's not our goal, is to kill people. But if innocent people are still dying at the hands of terrorists, we have to do what President Trump is known for, and that is cutting the head of the snake off. So
are you encouraging him to launch military operations on Nigeria?
No, I'm encouraging the president to look at all angles. I mean, I'm encouraging everyone to know that, again, our first goal is diplomacy, and that's what spiritual diplomats are, and that's what we do. But obviously, some people are just evil. Some people just want to push their agenda onto those who are not believers. And so they will kill imams, they will kill priests, they will kill women, they will kill children, they're raping people. We got to be clear. It's not a war of Christians versus Muslims. This is a war of terror, evil terror.
What about the Nigerian government? Why are they not taking action to protect their civilians, whether they, as you say, are Muslims or Christians? And the description you have given of the situation on the ground, that these terrorist groups are targeting everybody, it appears.
I asked that very same question. This is the response that's come back to me. And again, this is at the highest level of the Nigerian government from a religious point of view. The reality of it is they don't have the resources. They don't have the military training. They don't have the weapons. They desperately want to take care of their people, but they don't have the military assistance that they're requesting from the United States of America. I leave it up to those that decide. They are begging for help. They are grateful for help. They don't care what China is saying. They're asking the United States, please come in. If we can't come to a resolve, if the Nigerians cannot protect their own Christian Nigerians and the Muslims and those who are innocent in the north part of Nigeria, then President Trump will come in to protect people. And that's what it's all about. Do I want that to happen? No, because bombs create more terrorists. Bombs accidentally killing the wrong people creates more enemies. Diplomacy is what wins the day. But in some cases, some people are just pure evil. They come from the gates of hell. And those people, you just have to, listen, the Bible says you live by the sword, you have to die by the sword.
That was Pastor Mark Burns speaking to me a little earlier. Well, this is The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Next up on the programme, we stay on religion, but this time in Brazil, and talk to the director of a new documentary about the power of evangelical Christianity in the country.
we are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club. 4 more years! Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Welcome back. We're going to stay with that theme of what Donald Trump's religious advisor described before the break as spiritual diplomacy. In Brazil, evangelical Christian leaders have become political kingmakers in an increasingly volatile country. Just have a look.
In the last 40 years, evangelicals have grown from 5 to more than 30% of Brazil's population. A rapid religious shift molded into an unprecedented political force.
No meu voto, o que vai influenciar mesmo é a minha religião.
Somos maioria absoluta!
That's a snippet from the documentary Apocalypse in the Tropics. It offers a clear snapshot of what happens when religion, politics, and humanity collide. It's being praised for capturing not just the turbulence in Brazil, but also how it affects the lives of the people living through it. And I'm pleased to say Director Petra Costa joins me live now. Petra, thank you so much for joining me here on the programme. And first of all, this took you 4 years to make and frankly, two presidents, COVID. Just talk us through that very epic journey.
It was epic indeed, and it's actually 10 years because it comes from my previous documentary, The Edge of Democracy, and through these 10 years, I managed to film presidents being impeached, imprisoned, plotting coups, invading palaces, and now arrested. Next week, President Bolsonaro will most likely be arrested for 27 years for coup plotting. It was quite epic indeed, and my desire was to investigate not just the crisis of Brazilian democracy, but use Brazil as a metaphor for this global phenomena that we're seeing, and in its marriage with religious fundamentalism. So the protagonist of our film is a pastor called Silas Malafaia, who in the beginning was one of many allies of Bolsonaro, but in the end, he was writing his speeches, coordinating and manipulating his actions, and recently was also added to the investigation of the coup plotting.
I mean, that is extraordinary. And I guess one of the questions that you ask, as part of the heart of this film, as you sort of track this period in Brazil's history, is when does a democracy turn into a theocracy? And that is very much how you're tracking it, the kind of role of religion in the center of this, how important it is for the people of Brazil and how much it is then manipulated and used by politicians and people in powerful positions to, I guess, fundamentally make their way to power and stay in power.
Yes, one question that I was asking myself right at the beginning of this, because my parents were fighting against a military dictatorship in Brazil, a dictatorship that lasted 21 years. And I was born believing that democracy was my birthright. And when I suddenly saw people in the streets asking for the return of the military dictatorship in Brazil, a president first being impeached without having committed a crime, and then Bolsonaro being elected, a president who became famous as a candidate for saying that the dictatorship should come back, that its mistake was not to kill 30,000 people, and managed to get the electoral vote of the working class by flirting with religion and by being anointed the Messiah, similarly as what happened later to Trump. I was very intrigued in what made that marriage possible. I think evangelicalism gave to the far-right leader in Brazil and also in the United States the miracle of working against the working class, because basically they want to lower taxes for the rich, take out social benefits, but by giving the religious element that much of this working class wants.
And Petra, you made a little point about it earlier, about just how this is a global phenomenon and how these groups actually are interconnected and work together in some way to ensure that they spread their message and spread the kind of influence that they have.
Yes, Bannon said a while ago that the far-right movement, in its alliance with the fundamentalist religious movement, I would add, spreads like a pandemic, and that's what we're seeing everywhere, right? When did we imagine that in 2025 we would be at the risk not only of becoming autocratic governments, but theocratic governments? And yes, that's what we're seeing in the United States, in India, in Israel, in Brazil.
It's interesting you also say that you thought democracy was your birthright. Do you think for a lot of people of a certain generation, they've suddenly realized it's not something that people have a monopoly over? You can lose it as quickly as you gain it.
Actually, when I first had the idea of making this film was after I read a text by a young British author about the impact he felt with Brexit, that his whole idea of what the future would be was destabilized at that moment. So yes, I think many young people around the world felt that democracy was a granted thing and that we would gain more and more rights, and not that we would have to be fighting for the rights that we're actually losing, the rights that were conquered by the generation before us.
Yeah, extraordinary. Petra Costa, really grateful to have you here, and your film Apocalypse in the Tropics is on Netflix. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, this is The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Next up on the programme, the World Cup history makers. We celebrate the tiny nation of Curaçao's entry into the biggest football event on the planet.
I'm Deborah Haynes, Sky Security and Defence Editor.
The reality of life under Russian fire.
People don't want to leave, even though help is here to evacuate them. They say they want to sort out their belongings first. It's absolute chaos.
Fire, shouts the commander. There's a dash to safety, as Russian drones will be trying to find this position.
We've now got to wait inside the shelter to see if there is incoming. I've been covering Russia's full-scale war since it began, witnessing the terror and the trauma.
When rockets fall, I try to hide my head under my toys.
Illustrating Ukraine's lost childhood. Hopes and dreams framed by war.
Conflict in the Middle East is another major focus.
An incredibly dangerous moment.
We saw the missiles streaking across the sky. We saw the intercept going up, and then we saw the explosions when the intercepts were successful. With global threats rising, I also explored defence and security in the UK and across NATO.
This US aircraft carrier is operating in European waters in a deliberate show of force.
This is routine training for NATO, but should Russia's war with Ukraine escalate significantly, pilots like these could be called upon to go into combat for real.
Tucked away in the National Archives are some of the UK's old defence plans.
The scale of this bunker underlines how seriously governments took the threat of nuclear attack and global conflict. Should allies listen to Vladimir Putin's sabre-rattling?
No, they shouldn't, and they don't.
Sky News, the full story first.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin. The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks. If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach. This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.
Welcome back. For almost 3 years, Sky News and our Africa correspondent Yusra El-Bagir has been covering the horrors of the Sudan war and the human cost of the fighting. The United Arab Emirates has been widely accused of backing the paramilitary group, the RSF. Just have a listen to this admission from an RSF intelligence officer just 2 months ago.
In the beginning, it was the Russians, Wagner and the state. Now they say it's the UAE supporting the RSF. Many of the planes landing in Niala are said to bring weapons from the UAE, and particularly through Amjaris airport in Chad. It's a financial relationship, no more. The RSF controls areas with large gold mines. Darfur alone has more than 4 or 5 gold mines, and the UAE is a gold trading hub.
Well, the UAE deny this, but today the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman asked Donald Trump to turn his attention to the Sudan war and step in to help end it.
His Majesty would like me to do something very powerful having to do with Sudan. It was not on my my charts to be involved in that. I thought it was just something that was crazy and out of control. But I just see how important that is to you and to a lot of your friends in the room. Sudan, and we're going to start working in Sudan. I didn't think that that was one that was going to be so easy to do, but we're going to start working.
So that was Donald Trump speaking today in that forum, investment forum that he held in honor of Mohammed bin Salman, the Saudi Crown Prince. And of course, as Donald Trump said there, he has been asked by MBS to shift his focus towards Sudan. So can he end the conflict in Sudan? Is the world's attention now focused on what's being described as a forgotten war? We will continue, of course, to bring you updates on all developments from Sudan. And finally tonight, we've been enjoying the scenes of celebration as nations secure their places in next year's World Cup in America, Canada and Mexico. But you'll struggle to find a win that brings more joy than the tiny Caribbean island of Curacao. Well, the island nation is located around 70 kilometers off the Venezuelan coast and has a population of just over 150,000. Well, they became the smallest nation to ever qualify for the World Cup after drawing 0-0 with Jamaica. 10 years ago, they were 150th in FIFA's world rankings. Now they're 82nd, but they are also World Cup bound. Well, thanks for joining us tonight. No doubt we will have more developments on that peace plan for Ukraine being negotiated between Russia and the United States. Goodbye for now.